Hi everyone, I just wanted to give some pointers and tips that might be helpful for teaching our standard RI 1.3 that is a focus in week 13 and then for day 1 of week 14 as well. So it's a tough standard, complexity level 3, and that is why it is going to be a focus standard for these weeks, and then also it will be a focus standard again in the third 9 weeks of upcoming instruction. So one of the cautions to be careful of with the standard is that we have to remember we're not teaching text structure at this point in third grade. That is a fourth grade standard. So we in third grade are having students pay attention to that relationship between ideas that are presented in a text. So maybe think of it as having students be able to categorize some of the ideas. And so having them see that, oh, here in the text, the author's talking about the first step in a procedure, and then maybe a couple of paragraphs later, we're getting into the second step in that procedure, and then maybe, further on down the text, it's the next step in the procedure. And those are all related to each other because they're steps in a procedure, and I can describe that relationship. So I have to be able to understand the relationship before I can describe the relationship. So that's important. And so think of how you can possibly use the anchor chart that is in weekly resources to help students be able to see that those are some categories that authors typically use. And when we are paying attention to the ideas in that text, it helps us to understand and enjoy the information from the author a little bit easier. So cause and effect is a tough one. It does say using cause and effect language. So that would be thinking about what happened and why. And that's why you'll hear that repeated over and over in the guides is what happened and why. So we want our students to think about, well, why did that happen? And then the opposite of that, is what effect did that have on this other idea in the text? So then just think about how they can use that language to describe that relationship. Again, staying away from full text structure. This standard actually, though, RI 1.3 is very connected to 3.8, which is thinking about the connection between sentences or paragraphs. So right now, we're really laying a strong foundation for this in cluster 1 of our standards. But when we continue on, especially in the third 9 weeks, we're going to have a stronger focus as well on 3.8. And so those are very related to each other. And in third grade, that's laying a foundation for them to really learn text structure and be able to identify those text structures in a text. So for right now, again, remember relationship. And if your students if you need to alter the instruction for your students, so that they are just focusing on one relationship within a text. Maybe they're just focusing on the relationship of an ideas in a sequence. Then take the questions that are in the guide and just use the ones that are focused on that procedure, or you might have to create a couple of your own if they're not there. If you're just focusing on the one, because at this point, the guides right now with week 13 and 14 are written to have students pay attention to all 3 of those possible categories and think about the relationship in them. But your students might need to just focus on one, and that is a differentiation piece that you can make based off of the needs of your students. So I hope that helps. There are some resources that have just been added into week 13 and 14 that can help to help students to work with this complex standard. So I hope that helps, and have a great week. And please email me if you have any questions that I can help with. Thanks.